the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The prayer this morning will be offered by the delegate representing Prince George's County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Let us pray. Gracious God, we come this morning, first and foremost, to thank you for your amazing grace and for the mercy that you have extended to each of us. We pray this morning that you would have mercy upon us according to thy loving kindness, according to the multitude of thy tender mercies. We pray for the courage, the wisdom, and the strength to lay down our pride, our prejudices, our patronizing, and our pretentious behaviors, that we come together intentionally to serve the needs of all people created in your image and in your likeness. We pray for hearts that demonstrate your grace to show up in those places and spaces that assure the least, the lost, and the left behind are loved and served in ways that assure their safety and well-being are secure, that's our priority, such that they truly know that we are our brothers and our sisters' keepers. We pray, God, that this place and this space that we find ourselves in gives us the motive and the mentality and the mindset to bring our values and the value of all people to the forefront of Maryland's history. May we always extend ourselves in a way that our hearts, our minds, and the wisdom and courage that is inside of us would in fact let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Have your way in our works today. Let the words of our mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in your sight. This is our prayer in your great name. Amen.
Amen. Quorum call.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their presence? If so, the clerk will take the call. There being 128 members present, the House is now in session. The clerk will read the journal from the previous day.
Annapolis, Maryland, February the 18th, 2025.
Recognizing the Deputy Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be considered the reading of the journal.
So ordered, petitions, memorials, and other papers. Introduction of House bills. The clerk will read the bills and their committee assignment.
House Bill 1519, Delegate Shane, House Rules. House Bill 1520, Delegate Stein, House Rules, by Order Sylvia Seeger, Chief Clerk.
The clerk will read the bond initiatives and the committee assignment.
Introductory House Bond Initiatives number 46, February 19, 2025, refer to appropriations. Introductory House Bond Initiatives number 47, February 19, 2025, refer to appropriations.
Okay. Message from the Senate. Consent calendar number 6, Senate bills introduced in the House. Clerk will read the first bill and committee assignment.
Senate Bill 68, Senator Brooks, Ways and Means.
Recognizing the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So much be considered the reading of Senate Bill 68. Be considered the reading for all the bills on the calendar.
Hearing no objection, the bills are read the first time and referred to the appropriate committees. House Resolution. Recognizing the good delegate representing Washington and Frederick counties.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Permission to use delegate's name?
Permission granted.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good morning, colleagues. Please join Delegate Weibel and myself in welcoming the 2024 Maryland Public Secondary Schools Athletic Association Class 1A Volleyball State Champions, Boonesboro High School. These young student athletes displayed sportsmanship, teamwork, and integrity this past season while representing their community, Washington County, and the state of Maryland with pride. As a result of their hard work and determination, the Boonesboro High School girls volleyball team won its second volleyball state championship, its first in 40 years, dating back to 1984. In fact, 2024 was only the second time in history 3 Washington County volleyball teams won state championships in the same season. Boonesboro in 1A, Williamsport in 2A, and North Hagerstown High in 3A. Please join us in welcoming Boonesboro head coach Shelby Wallace and athletic director Mike Marsh, in addition to several team members, their family, friends, are all here today in the front gallery. Please join us in congratulating them. Congratulations and go Warriors.
Will the reading clerk please read the resolution in full?
Be it hereby known to all that the House of Delegates of Maryland offers its sincerest congratulations to the Boonesboro High School girls varsity volleyball team in recognition of winning the 1A state championship title. The entire membership extends best wishes on this memorable occasion and directs this resolution to be presented on this 19th day of February 2025.
House resolution recognizing the good delegate representing Prince George's County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Victoria Tori Bayless and Davion Percy are from the Luminous Health Organization, which is really 2 wonderful hospitals. Anne Arundel Medical Center here in Annapolis, where they take care of us when we get sick and we need that kind of care, and they have a wonderful medical system. And also, so happens, they also have a hospital in my district, Doctors Community Hospital in Lanham, Maryland. But the reason I asked for this House resolution is because they have worked so hard and so tirelessly to help us with the blood drive. They've done this year after year. We had to take a break after 2019. There was COVID, there were construction issues, there are all kinds of things going on. We have restarted it, and they are a huge part of why it has been such a success. And I wanted to ask that we honor them with this resolution, Madam Speaker.
Will the reading clerk please read the resolution in full?
Be it hereby known to all that the House of Delegates of Maryland offers its sincerest congratulations to Victoria Bayless in recognition of your unwavering support of the Maryland General Assembly blood drive by providing the opportunity to give the gift of life. The entire membership extends best wishes on this memorable occasion and directs this resolution to be presented on this 19th day of February 2025.
Special order calendar. The clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 380.
Hold. I did something wrong. Got to recognize the maker, or you better read it first.
Whichever.
Read the bill, and then we do that.
House Bill 380, criminal law, prohibition on sale of contraceptives and contraceptive devices by vending machine in school, repeal. Favor report adopted.
Recognizing the maker of the motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have an amendment at the desk. It is amendment number 633020-1/1.
Amendment number 1.
Move so much be considered the reading of the amendment.
So ordered.
Thank you. Body, this is a common sense amendment. It's really very simple. It would keep the prohibition protection in place on the sale of contraceptives or contraceptive devices by means of a vending machine or other automatic device at the kindergarten, nursery school, or elementary school levels, as was already prescribed in the bill, so it would just restore that language. The argument may be that the Maryland General Assembly no longer thinks this offense should be in the criminal code. However, I would argue that selling a 5th grader Plan B or giving a kindergartner a condom or even allowing a preschooler access to Opal should come with some scrutiny on criminal intent. I have a few questions for the floor leader regarding the amendment.
Floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yes, Delegate.
Hello, good morning.
Morning.
So we got to talk a little bit yesterday.
And I appreciate you
that.
bringing
Yes.
the amendment to the committee beforehand. Unfortunately, I am going to ask the body to reject this amendment. This is a criminal law.
I had questions. Is that?
But you have a
Yeah.
question.
Yes, I
Okay.
have questions for you. Is that okay?
Sure.
Yep. Okay. So what type of criminal charge are we talking about here? A felony, misdemeanor?
It's a misdemeanor, as well as subject to a fine up to $1,000.
Okay, so that's the penalty.
That's the current penalty.
Anything go on their record or anything like that?
The misdemeanor charge.
The misdemeanor charge. Okay. And then how many people, do you remember how many people have been charged under this, or has it been an issue?
I don't have exact numbers about how many people have been charged under this bill. It's a really innocuous bill that was enacted a really, really long time ago, over 30, 40 years ago. But all we're asking with this piece of legislation is just simply to remove the criminal penalties. It is not dictating policy of any sort of way. I'm not an educator, so I'm not going to tell our school systems what they should or should not be doing. I'm just simply a little lawyer, and so all we're doing is removing the criminal penalties.
But you're not keeping the prohibition. So if you remove the criminal penalties, you're also removing the prohibition of having these available.
Well, actually, it would be set by the school systems. The school systems would then have the ability to determine whether or not, from a policy standpoint, they wish to do anything different.
Okay.
But the bill is just simply removing the criminal penalties.
Okay, so I have a few more questions so that we'll know what kind of policy we're talking about. Does this bill include both prescription and over-the-counter contraceptives?
Just over the counter.
Because I didn't see where that was specified. It just says contraceptives.
It's just over the counter.
Okay, that's not specified.
It says prophylactics.
Okay. In last year's bill mandating contraceptive access at community colleges, which was HB 367, the vending machines only allow contraceptives or devices that are FDA approved without a prescription. Would this bill now allow for the potential of any contraceptive?
This has nothing to do with community colleges. It's just for our K through 12
Right,
schools.
let me finish the question. For any contraceptive to be accessed by, say, first graders then, that are FDA approved?
Again, this is just removing criminal penalties. It has nothing
The
to do with
prohibition, so it's
right, it has nothing
allowing
to
it
do with
to be
access
put in the
by first
schools.
graders. It's just removing a criminal penalty.
It would allow them to be put in schools. It's also
It has
removing the
nothing to do
prohibition.
with first graders. It's just removing the criminal penalty.
And removing the prohibition, so it would allow them to be put in schools. There would be nothing in Maryland state law that would prohibit them to be on school site if we repeal this.
So again, this is just removing the criminal penalty. School boards can determine what they would or would not like to do in their schools.
Right, but is there any Maryland law that would prohibit it then?
The school boards would make that determination.
Maryland law from the General Assembly?
Yes. Under Maryland law, the school boards make those types of decisions.
Okay, so we would be allowing that. So,
Well, no, we wouldn't be allowing that. This is just removing the criminal penalty. It's not setting any type of education policy.
So then you'd be okay if we had going in the forward that if we keep the prohibition but just remove the criminal penalty.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
So it would be, an okay amendment would be to keep the prohibition that we're not allowing it, but removing the criminal penalty.
No, actually, I think we do need to remove the criminal penalty altogether.
Right, that's what
And
I
that's what
said,
this
but we
bill
would be
does. It
keeping
does
the
not set any
prohibition.
type of policy.
Okay, so I just want to be clear here because my interpretation, it would seem, is if you're removing a prohibition, then you would be allowing school systems to do this, whether or not they do that. School policy isn't law. That's only policy that they approve, so
But
we would be allowing them to do that.
Can we go back to the amendment, though? The amendment
This is
does
the
not
amendment.
set policy.
The amendment would be restoring the language that these would be prohibited at the nursery school, preschool, kindergarten, elementary school level.
Your amendment would keep it as a crime. Subject to a misdemeanor.
If you're offering a kindergarten a condom, I would say that there may be some kind of criminal intent that at least needs to be looked at.
Okay.
So
Well, this bill
that is
isn't
what the
offering
amendment says.
anything to anyone. The bill is not offering anything to anyone.
The bill allows access, but let me go on. Maybe I can clear this up with some of the questions here. So, is there an age restrictions on purchasing FDA-approved contraceptives in Maryland?
This is only related to over-the-counter contraception.
Which is there any age restricted there? Do you know the list of FDA-approved over-the-counter contraceptives?
Condoms, spermicide, contraception sponge, are
And
some of those.
some of them. The other two are emergency contraceptives. Plan B and Opal are both now over-the-counter contraceptives as approved by the FDA, which would potentially then be allowed to be in vending machines or automatic dispensers at elementary schools without this amendment.
Again, this amendment is just removing the criminal penalties. It's not dictating policy. It's not stating what will or will not be in any vending machine.
It is keeping the prohibition in there is what the amendment will do. So the amendment would not allow then, if the amendment were adopted, it would not allow public schools, public, private nursery schools to have contraceptives available in a vending machine. That is what the amendment would do. But
Your
what's
amendment
happening
would
with the
continue to
bill
make
is
it a
you're
crime.
repealing it. So, okay, and I'm not even going to get started about Head Start. So currently, 5th graders can't even carry a Midol or an Aleve for cramps to school. But then with this, they could potentially be dispensed emergency contraceptives.
I'm not an educator. I don't set education policy.
All right, so we've discussed a little bit about how this would be educational policy decisions. However, private facilities and private schools, which would be under the subject of this, are not subject to this policy or law, and neither are school-based health centers. School-based health centers are, in fact, under the Maryland Department of Health.
I'm sorry, how is that related to the amendment?
Because
That's before the body?
school-based health centers are located on schools. If we leave elementary schoolers in, a lot of our school-based health centers are located at elementary schools. They could therefore, if the Department of Health decided that that was appropriate, they could put those vending machines in our elementary schools at the school-based health centers. That's why it is. So what we've done by law is we have juxtaposed healthcare with education. And school-based health centers are often run by nonprofits, community health groups, healthcare providers, and the Department of Health. There are 89 centers currently that I could find across 16 jurisdictions, with more to come under the community school design. So day one, after this passes, could a school-based health center decide to offer a contraceptive vending machine at our schools? Even elementary schools. Because that is where many school-based health centers are located right now. You can find your list on the Maryland Department of Health website. For example, a listed provided service in Montgomery County Department of Health and Human Services, which runs their school-based health centers, is reproductive health care, STI prevention and testing, prescriptions, and dispensing of medications. So they're already doing this with dispensing medications, and now they could do it with the over-the-counter ones through the vending machines if this is not repealed. 10 of the Montgomery County school-based health centers are located in elementary schools. That's why this amendment is important. So again, I'm going to ask, would you please consider keeping the prohibition at elementary schools, but then if you wanted to repeal a criminal charge, we could possibly do that in the Senate. And then lastly, I just want to talk about, if you have access to this in elementary schools, there have been recent TikTok challenges that have actually resulted in a lot of school bathrooms being shut down due to kids stealing and damaging toilet seats, sinks, and stalls. So they do respond to these TikTok challenges. 2 other TikTok challenges involved snorting a latex condom through your nasal cavity, and another where a water-filled condom is dropped on a person's head. Oh, and then there was another one where they used needles to poke holes in condoms. So do you have any concern with this being at younger ages, that the unintended consequences of allowing vending machines in elementary schools? And then I guess I do have one more legal question for you. Would any of the students that are covered under my amendment be of the age of consent in Maryland?
That's not what this bill is about,
Okay.
or your amendment.
Is
So,
the age of consent 16?
so I would like us to focus on the amendment and the bill that is before us. The bill is just simply removing a criminal penalty. That's all this bill does. It's a very simple bill. It is not setting policy. It is not mandating anything. It is not dictating what school systems should or should not do, what the school health centers should or should not do. It's just simply removing a criminal penalty. And for those reasons, I ask the body to resist the amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
So I have one more question. So recently, in Anne Arundel County, I believe, we have even a teacher that was accused of 50 counts of abuse. Do you have any concern, and we have sex trafficking, students are being victimized, do you have any concern that this would facilitate any kind of abuse situation in institutions, which we know has been a problem?
That doesn't sound like it's related to the amendment at hand.
Okay, all right.
Madam Speaker.
And then, can I ask the title of the bill?
The titles,
Is the prohibition on the sale of contraceptives and contraceptive devices. So repealing this would not just only repeal the criminal, it would repeal the prohibition and allow it to be in the elementary schools without my amendment. That's my
it's a
understanding.
criminal
If you
law.
have-
It's a criminal law. It does not dictate what our school system should or should not do. It's just simply removing a criminal penalty. That's it.
Madam Speaker, I press my amendment.
And I would urge the body to resist the amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Yes. Go ahead. Gentlelady from Hartford.
Sorry. Madam Speaker? Thank you. I just have a quick question for the chair, or the floor chair,
Floor leader.
or floor leader, I'm sorry. I've been out of it a little bit. Okay. Madam Floor Leader, quick question. I know that Maryland has been labeled as one of the higher areas where we have a lot of human trafficking because of location, the ports, the airports, 95, and I know some of my colleagues who I will not mention, but of the other side, have put in bills about the concerns about human trafficking. And so I'm wondering if we take this little, what do I want to say, little gate that might stop somebody, that could trip somebody that is trafficking in children, because everybody needs to be concerned about their kids. So I'm wondering, would the fact that we take this penalty off make it easier for folks to be more incentivized to traffic children, children that are maybe in foster care, that are in this public school system, or are with dysfunctional families, that they're easy to grab and kind of groom and then get them into, because I know this legislature has done a tremendous amount of work regarding the needs and the care and the compassion for folks that have been human trafficked. So with that said, the fact that we are labeled nationally as a high human trafficking area, my concern is even though we're kind of saying we're taking away the criminal penalty, the problem is that it's still making it easier for the bad guys. So with that, I just asked that question. Thank you, Madam Speaker, for indulging the long explanation.
The answer is no.
Is there any further debate? Hearing none, the question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
What's going to happen?
The clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker,
Madam Speaker, in explaining my vote,
Explain your vote.
I just wanted to say that I really think that this amendment is not going to head Maryland in the direction that we need to go. And I thank the floor leader for their marvelous job in defending the committee's work. Thank you.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Clerk will take the call. There being 40 in the positive, 92 in the negative. The amendment fails. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Okay. Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Special order calendar number 9. The clerk will read the bill.
Household 424, Prescription Drug Affordability Board, authority for upper payment limits, lowering prescription drug costs for all Marylanders Now Act. Favorable report is amended, adopted.
Maker of the motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have an amendment at the desk. It is 783722/1.
Amendment number 1.
Move so much be considered the reading of the amendment.
So ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That is quite a mouthful, the name of this bill. That's quite a lot of words there. I didn't even really read that, but it's quite a lot. I think we're going to talk for a little while today about prescription drugs and affordability and upper payment limits and how they fit in. And the first amendment that we'll offer today, I think, sort of presages some of what our concerns are. And I hope that they're everyone's concerns about how this works in the real world in a system which we say again and again and again. Maryland is not an island. We're not a country. We're just one of 50 states. We're not a particularly big one, quite frankly, in terms of our economic purchasing power compared to California, New York, Texas, Florida, Ohio. Those places are all much larger than us. And so we have to operate in a federally regulated arena and in an arena that has not only a national but a global economic basis and sort of regulatory framework to it. And so the primary concerns that we have with upper payment limits are that they will potentially alter the way that the pharmaceutical and biotech industries work and the way that they operate here for our Maryland citizens, and they will potentially decrease availability of drugs. Life-saving drugs. Some life-saving drugs are extremely expensive. It's very difficult to put a price upon someone's health or their life, but they cost an awful lot of money. So what this initial amendment does to sort of begin this discussion of, I think all of our amendments, virtually all of them, will focus on that issue. We want to make sure that by accident, because I don't think it's anyone's intent, certainly not the bill sponsors or the floor leaders, we want to make sure that we don't have the unintended consequence of we do a policy that almost no other state in America does. You hear that an awful lot. We just do it our way. And we have this policy that discourages companies from offering or for having life-saving drugs, drugs that really have a significant impact, maybe even on small populations of patients who need them either to live or to have any quality of life. So what the First Amendment does is that before the Prescription Drug Affordability Board institutes an upper payment limit, that they would have to certify that those limits would not result in reduced patient access due to drug shortages, formulary restrictions, and some of this is gibberish for many of us, but the formulary restrictions is how the insurers or the dreaded PBMs come up with the list of what drugs they will approve and at what prices and what you can offer on your insurance plan, or whether it's through an employer or some other entity. and if the upper payment limit would increase patient out-of-pocket costs. And as part of that process, the PDAB would have to consult with patient advocacy groups, including chronic disease patients. These are the people who are, very, very reliant on these medications and their pricing. Rare disease patients, somebody who says, it's probably not economically beneficial for somebody to make this incredibly complex drug that costs a ton in research and development because there's only 50 or 100 or 150 or 5,000 of me in the United States that suffers from this. But my goodness, if that was my son, my daughter, my loved one, or any of yours, we sure as heck would want our American pharmaceutical industry to produce that drug that could change their life, even if it was just one. Cost-benefit analysis maybe doesn't make sense, but that's the way that all of us would want this industry to work. And you would also have to consult with patient advocacy groups that include communities of color, because there's a concern that in those communities there's less access to pharmacies, there's less access to the type of insurance, the sort of gold-plated insurance that all of us probably have by virtue of the fact that we are elected officials of the state of Maryland. We're very fortunate to have that. That's all the amendment does. And one of the primary reasons that we push this again is because people in this industry, I don't think any of them are villains, and I don't think any of them are heroes. The pharmaceutical manufacturers, the insurers, the pharmacies, the doctors, all of them take a little cut of where the money goes. All of them are affected by this in certain ways, and none of them are just horrible people here to gouge you for the money, and none of them are also altruistic of like, we're just doing this for the heck of it. They all are for-profit entities. They all need to maintain their ability to continue their company. And so they're basically saying that, hey, insurers or PBMs, they could place medications subject to these upper payment limits on other formulary tiers or implement what they call utilization management. They could come to your loved one and say, well, look, you're taking Superdrug, and Maryland says that the insurers can only pay X amount for Superdrug, so we're going to take Superdrug and change it. We're going to take it off the list of what you can get, and now you have to get substitute Superdrug. That your doctor thinks it's better for you to be on Superdrug, but we don't pick that up anymore. It's subject to an upper payment limit. We're not pushing that one out there because we're losing money on it. We're losing money. We have to buy it at a certain price, and then we can't sell it back at a certain price, and so we're not going to pay for it. So you're going to switch your drugs because we told you to. Only in Maryland, not in Virginia, not in Pennsylvania, not in West Virginia, not in North Carolina, not in New York, not in state after state after state after state that is not doing this. But just here, just in Baltimore, just in Bethesda, just in Cumberland, just in Leonardtown, you have to switch your medicine because Maryland decided this policy. And so all the amendment does is it just puts a little bit of a guardrail in and says that before these things actually get done, and let's be honest, it can't be so urgent because we passed the Prescription Drug Affordability Board concept 6 years ago, and sitting here today, there has not been a single upper payment limit that has yet been enacted by the board. So if it was so urgent and so critical, and this is the silver bullet that will reduce drug prices, and we got to do it now, I believe that the people in this room and the people that work for this board, they would have done it by now. And I know there's been some implementation hiccups along the way and some funding issues, but it's not an issue of, man, when they set that upper payment limit, we just got to do it tomorrow or things are going to go bad. All this does is it basically says, hey, you have to make sure, you have to absolutely certify that this is not going to cost people access to their drugs, to their medications, and we're going to consult with them. We're going to consult with rare and chronic disease patients and communities of color with the PDAB and make sure that they do it. And I will tell you this, I was a little bit astonished to find this out. Transparency is a real issue with PDAB. They've had 26 public meetings since they were formed in 2021. Only 5 of those meetings you can review online. Only 5. The Stakeholder Council has had 18 public meetings since they were formed in 2022. Only 4 of them you can go back and see what they did and how they did it. Patient advocacy groups can find that out. That's different than everything else we do here. All of everything we do in every committee and here on the floor, you can go back and you can find out what happened and why and what the history and what the intent was. Not with this one. And so we just want to ensure that we're injecting some more transparency and we're injecting some more voices for patients, because they're the people who care about this the most. It's not insurers, it's not pharmaceutical companies, it's not PBMs, it's people. It's people who want and need to get these medications, and they don't want to inadvertently lose that access because of a regulatory policy. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Vice Chair of the committee.
Whew. The minority leader just read my entire life in these 90 days for the last 3 years. What we talk about in insurance and pharmaceuticals for 90 days. But I thank him for sort of setting the foundation for the debate that we're going to have this morning. I think it's important to start with, and I'm going to just speak to the amendments that he has brought before us. But I do want to say that in the original statute that created the Prescription Drug Affordability Board, the purpose was to protect Marylanders, protect members of the supply chain, including pharmacies, from the high cost of prescription drugs. And I don't know at this point, because we, as the good delegate said, we don't have the example right now in terms of how it can save us money. We have a theory, we have a concept, we're ready to go to test this concept. So now we're in the process of doing that. But I know that we have to do something. We cannot continue at this rate of increase of pharmaceutical drugs. So the good delegate's amendment, the first part of it is already the charge of the Prescription Drug Affordability Board. They may not set upper payment limits that are going to cause access problems. And as far as formularies go, that's an insurance PBM relationship. It's not the board. But again, going back to the original statute, all of those entities are considered in the creation of an upper payment limit. In terms of consulting with particular patient groups, I understand that there hasn't been there is now consistent recording, and you can see on video the meetings of both the board and the stakeholder group. The first 2 years were basically organizational and just putting the meeting processes in place. Once they got those in place, they started making these all public. And anyone can watch those meetings. They are posted on the website to say that they're happening. Anyone can make public comments, both orally, and I will admit they are timed, as we do in HGO, and I think probably every other committee here, because we want to make sure that we give everyone a chance to speak, or in writing. And I have actually sat in a board meeting where I have seen a packet of paper no less than 2 inches thick, which are input from outside groups and constituent groups and patient groups, with the questions and the responses, which are also published. So there is the availability to participate in this process, and that's, I think, one of the strongest points of our board, that we allow that level of involvement and engagement by the public and literally by all of the elements of the drug pricing chain. So I would suggest to you, please resist this amendment. I don't believe it's necessary. I believe it's within the charge already of the board, and the board has processes in place to be inclusive. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Briefly, Madam Speaker.
Yes, briefly.
Thank you. I would just say this. So it sounds like we're on the same page that we have to do these things, which is great. But the people who are out there day to day in this process, the people who are in these industries who understand this better than we do, they don't think that's what's happening, or else we wouldn't be here talking about it. And I would suggest to you, when we talk about access to drugs in your local pharmacies, then this is the National Alliance of State Pharmacy Associations. It's right out there. Prescription drug affordability boards have been created in several states with the goal to lower prescription drug costs for patients. One of the oldest, Maryland's, is over 5 years old, but they have yet to fulfill their promise to lower any medicine costs. Even worse, the implementation of upper payment limits appears likely to impact patient access to life-saving medicines and financially harm vulnerable community pharmacies. This is becoming a liability rather than the admirable solution that it was intended to be. We always think we know better. We always think we know better. The people who are on the front lines of it, the people who make their livings in it, they come in and they say this isn't going to work, hasn't really worked anywhere, and yet we just do it anyway. And so I appreciate, my friend from Montgomery County suggesting that a lot of the concerns that we have in this amendment and throughout this day will be hopefully taken into consideration by the board. But I want you to think that if the people who are dealing with this in real life believed that, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be here offering these things. We would all be saying, yep, it's working great. We're reducing prescription costs and no one's losing access. That's not what's happening in the real world. And that's really the only purpose of that amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? No. Roll call. Clerk will call.
Madam Speaker?
Has everyone recorded their vote? The clerk will take the call. There being 36 in the positive, 96 in the negative. The amendment fails. Are there any additional amendments to the bill to its title?
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You have another one?
I do, Madam Speaker. 293321/1.
Amendment number 1.
Move so much be considered the reading of the amendment.
So ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The governor of the state of Maryland has told all of us that one of the number one things that we have to do, which I believe 100% in agreement with him, is increase our private sector economy. It is one of the primary reasons why we have budget problems. It is one of the primary reasons why we cannot pay for the aspirations of many in this room, because our private sector economy that fuels many other states that want to do these things is not very good. Was not very good. Everyone in this room, I sit next to the Appropriations Committee chair. He's a person of good faith. I know that he is very, very concerned that because we are so reliant on federal government funding and federal government jobs and ancillary to the federal government jobs, that federal government downsizing, whether you like it or not, is going to have an outsized impact on our ability to do what people in this room want to do with Maryland state dollars. And so the governor has said one of the things we have to do is we have to prioritize certain sectors that Maryland can be great at. And one of those sectors is life sciences and biotechnology, because the FDA and the NIH and other entities are located in Maryland, at least right now. And it's something that historically we have a connection to, and we can grow in that industry. But the problem is the biotech, the pharmaceutical, the life sciences industries, they're very concerned about PDAB. And again, we can villainize them and say, oh, they're just these evil people that are just concerned because they're not getting paid. But they're the people who are creating the jobs and the taxes and the revenues to do what all of you want to do. You can't villainize the person who pays your salary. And that's what the private sector does in any situation. That's who funds government. That's who employs people that we take their cut of their taxes. Those are the people who make more than $500,000 and $1 million that we want to take more of their money so we can fund what we want. And their perspective is very clear. They're very concerned that the PDAB upper payment limit system may have a negative impact upon their investment in this state and their ability to turn us into the best bioscience, life sciences in America. So what the amendment does is it just says before setting any new upper payment limit, the board conducts a study. Study doesn't sound so terrible, of the potential effects of the upper payment limit on the state biotechnic industry, including the impact on pharmaceutical investment, biotech industry job growth, research and development funding, and clinical trials and drug development partnerships. I would submit to you that's all the amendment does. If you want people to pay for your blueprint, if you want people to pay for your mass transit, if you want people to pay for your Medicaid expansion, you have to work with the people who pay for it. You have to. You can't just ignore them and say, nope, I don't care about your concern. You're evil. You're a villain. We're just not going to listen to you. It's a partnership. And that's what these industries have come and suggested is we're very concerned about this. We're not saying you can't do the upper payment limit. We're not saying all of them are bad, all of them are wrong. We just like a little guardrail and a little break that says before you do it, conduct a study, bring the people in, and figure out if this is going to have a negative impact on our industry. Because God forbid that we do something in this chamber that costs thousands of jobs, tens of millions of dollars in revenue. I think we've been doing it. I think we've been doing it for a lot of years. And, you know, the prices come due. The prices come due this year for a lot of those decisions. So the amendment is offered in that good faith spirit on behalf of one of the biggest and most important industries in our state. I think that we need to take their consideration seriously. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Vice Chair of the committee.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would ask the body to reject this amendment. I think the amendment is just, again, asking whether or not a prescription drug affordability board is a concept that we need to pursue. And we welcome biotech industry here. Montgomery County has lots of it. And there are factors that make Maryland attractive to this industry. It's also worth noting that some of the policies and recommendations that the board is going to make that are non-cost containment might be of benefit to the biotech industry. But we have to remember what they're making. They're not making, their product is not something you can take or leave, like a car. Their product is life-saving. Their product is something that it contributes to the health of individuals and to communities and to our state. So there really, really does have to be a balance between profit and the ability to pay for the product. And I would say to you that the biotech industry and pharmaceutical companies, their business model is not regulated in any way, unlike a lot of the other pieces of the chain. And but their product is highly regulated, so we know that. But the reason, that fact is that the fact that they're unregulated contributes to the fact that they have the largest profit margins of S&P 500 companies. I'm not villainizing them. I'm not saying that they shouldn't make profits. I think under the system that we're recommending, they will continue to make profits. But they know that people have to buy their product or they'll be sick or worse. So, that's the reason that the state of Maryland, in the state of Maryland health insurance program, the price of the anti-diabetic drugs increased by 100% in 4 years. Over the last 4 years, the cost of those anti-diabetic drugs went from $14.5 million a year, this is Maryland alone, to the state program to $29.3 million in 4 years. I'd suggest to you that any loss of revenue that a pharmaceutical company experiences because of an upper payment limit, they could simply make up by stopping the advertising. It's really important that medical professionals know about the drugs. It's not really informational, I don't think, to market it to the general public. So let's think about what the bill really does. It's to protect the patients and the little guys, so that they get the same deal as the big guys. This will protect small businesses, self-insured employers, smaller markets, because what this bill does is increase the size of the Maryland market. It gives us more leverage for negotiation. 6 million covered lives. Right now, the way the system works is every individual carrier has to negotiate with PBM and pharma. Under this bill, that negotiation is going to occur on behalf of all 6 million covered lives for a drug. And you know, as well as I do, that the more covered lives you have, you can reduce the price of the drug. You have more leverage for negotiation. So for these reasons, I'd recommend that we reject this amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Maker of the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. 54,000 life science jobs in Maryland, 54,000. The biotech industry contributes roughly $20 billion to our state's economy. And what we're telling them is, we don't want you to make a lot of money, stop your television advertising. And that's what I find jarring here every day about everything. This is Annapolis, Maryland. It is not Washington, D.C., thank God. It is not. Some of people in this room will go on to become Congress people. I think that's wonderful. Most of us will not, thank God. We are not making national policy. We're not. We're doing things that our neighbors, so if your cousin lives in Arlington, if your brother-in-law lives in York, Pennsylvania, they have the same needs you do. They need Ozempic. They need a diabetes drug. They need a rare disease drug. And their system's going to be completely different than ours in how they pay and how those companies invest and what they do there. Because we got to have a policy. And so all I would ask, and the upper payment limits, again, the good delegate's completely right. It's an experiment. We don't know. 6 years. We don't know whether it's actually going to reduce prices. We don't know whether it's actually going to restrict access. Why don't we do it? Why don't we do it for a couple of years within the state plan and see how it turns out, instead of pushing this and at least not allowing, that's all the amendment does. I want to stay on the amendment. It just allows one of our state's most important entities to feel like their role in this system and their role in this state is being considered before people make decisions. That's all we want. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Is there any further debate? Seeing none, hearing none. The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Roll call. Clerk will call the roll call.
Madam Speaker?
Is everybody out of the room? Clerk will take the call. There are 35 in the positive, 99 in the negative. The amendment fails. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title?
Madam Speaker.
Yes. Gentlelady from Carroll.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have an amendment at the desk, amendment number 113920-1.
Amendment number 1.
Move so much be considered the reading of the amendment.
So ordered.
As we always say, it's a somewhat simple amendment, but it's very meaningful. And basically, this would take away the measure of quality adjusted life years as a measure used to quantify the health benefits of medical interventions or healthcare programs that are often used in decision making to ration healthcare resources. That raises a significant ethical concern to me and to a lot of people that these measures will put a price tag on the value of human life that merely reflects the individual's diagnosis and deems those with chronic, debilitating, and rare conditions as being less valuable than those with common conditions. This is significant to me because several years ago, before we had PDAB, but it brought immediate concerns to my mind. My dad was in his 70s, and he was being treated for multiple myeloma, but he was then diagnosed with prostate cancer. And it was determined at that time that he would not qualify or be able to receive treatment, the chemo treatment pills, to treat the prostate cancer. And the fact that he's in his 70s and maybe doesn't have as many years on this earth as somebody in their 20s or 30s, he's still a dear family member. He's still precious to all of our family. And I think for sake of fairness, I think that's the wrong way to handle this. In addition, in my research and asking some questions, I asked what are some of these chronic conditions where they're using this quality of life measurement. and I was told that one of the more expensive drugs treats cystic fibrosis. And for anyone that has known someone that suffers from cystic fibrosis, as you get older, it becomes very difficult to breathe. It's a difficult disease to treat, and yet quality of life and having the opportunity to work with your physician to make those decisions based on yourself or your family member, I think is extremely important to protect at all costs. So for those reasons, I would like to press that the quality of life be, as a metric, be removed so that patients, their family members, and their physicians are the ones that are making the decisions about what drugs are worth giving to that patient or not. It should be our decision. It should be our family's decision. So for that reason, I ask you to support this amendment. Thank you.
Vice Chair of the committee.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Delegate, for the explanation. I would ask the body to resist the amendment. I agree 100% that it's a family. It's the patient themselves who needs, and their physician, who need to make determinations about which pharmaceuticals they should take to have a good quality of life. But that's not the role of the board. And what the board is already doing, first of all, just to be sure, this bill and the board in no way will preclude any selling of any pharmaceutical in Maryland. So it's not going to stop any drugs from coming into Maryland for any reason. What the board will do, and what it has to do in the process it's created, is to consider the literature around the quality and quantity of life. The board conducts its own research, and I'm going to remind you the board is made up of 5 health economists. And so they're doing their own research. They have backgrounds and expertise in both health and economics, and they're conducting their own research as appropriate. There are particular studies called de novo studies where you can pay a consultant hundreds of thousands of dollars to do a value-based study on a drug, but it's not an efficient use of the board's time or of the board's resources. And there are already enough studies in the literature to answer the questions that the board might have about the particular value of a drug. I think what we need to remember is the timing here is urgent, and doing a study like this, like a de novo study, would just delay us even further. And I've heard the good delegate talk many times in the last few minutes about how long and protracted this process has been. And now that we're on the precipice of really moving forward, this is a recommendation to slow us down. And our timing is urgent because we're not getting any help from the federal government now. The ability to negotiate with Medicare has been rescinded by the current president. The cap on insulin costs for Medicare has been rescinded by the current president. We are seeing no evidence from the federal government that there is any effort to have any cost containment of pharmaceuticals. So I think it falls to us as a state to make sure that we are doing what we can to make sure that our residents can have the drugs that they need. And I have to hearken back to the mantra of drugs don't work if people can't afford them, and we're trying to make them affordable. I'd ask us to reject this amendment, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker?
Yes. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to correct the record real quick. This is a Reuters article from January 28th. Fact check, insulin cap Medicare unaffected by Trump orders.
Sponsor of the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I appreciate my good friend from Montgomery County and the discussion that we're having. I just want to, hearken back, and I hear all of the studies and the very clinical numbers discussions and affordability. What I want to remind this body is we're talking about human beings, we're talking about your individual care, your family's care, and I think that should be more important. And who's making the judgment about quality of life versus maybe they only have 10 years left on this earth? Who's making, what are we doing by doing that? You know, my mom, she had melanoma, and I remember her doctor saying, if you've seen one case of melanoma, you've seen one case of melanoma. And so she needed that drug to try to save her life. She was in her late 60s. I don't want a board to look at that and decide, well, we're not going to give her that expensive drug because what quality of life is she going to have? I don't want a board making that decision. So for that reason, to put the human face on it, I asked this body to consider quality of life, quality of care, and vote for the amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This amendment introduces a controversial metric, that's quality adjusted life years. That could lead to discrimination in healthcare decision making. This metric assigns values to life based on age, disability, and chronic illness, which risk deprioritizing treatment for vulnerable population. And we should focus on affordability and access for all patients, not rely on metrics that could limit care for senior, individual with disability, and those with chronic condition. Cost review should be fair, transparent, and center on patient needs, not on arbitrary quality of life calculations. For this reason, I urge no vote to keep HB 424 focused on equitable, patient-centered healthcare. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Is there any further debate on the amendment? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Roll call.
Madam Speaker.
Clerk will call the roll. There being 35 in the positive, 97 in the negative, the amendment fails. Are there any additional amendments to the bill to its title? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have an amendment at the desk. Amendment number 5737291.
Amendment number 1.
Move so much be considered as to the reading of the amendment.
So ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So this amendment excludes orphan drugs from the upper payment limits unless that prescription drug would have an alternative equivalent treatment. So now some of you may be wondering, what are orphan drugs? So orphan drugs are something that treats a rare disease. Okay, so what's a rare disease? A rare disease affects less than 200,000 people in America at any given time. So how many of us know someone with cystic fibrosis or ALS, sickle cell, maybe muscular dystrophy? These are all rare diseases. And if you think about a company and the research and development it takes to make one of those drugs, the opportunity to recover R&D for those disease states are very minimal. Back in the 90s, I sold pharmaceuticals. I was a rep for Shearing Plow and Key Pharmaceuticals. 81 million Americans are affected by seasonal allergic rhinitis. Think about 81 million Americans taking prescription drugs and the ability for those companies to recover research and development versus something, say ALS, 18,000 Americans. Fortunately, 18,000 Americans, it's not greater. But think about the company that put the effort in to improve the quality of life for those folks. Or the 40,000 folks in America that suffer from cystic fibrosis. Or sickle cell with 100,000 people suffering. And if we impose price caps, we could deter pharmaceuticals
from investing in such niche markets, potentially leading to fewer treatment options for people with rare disease. Right now, only 5% of rare diseases have an FDA-approved treatment. So folks, the bottom line, if upper payment limits are applied to rare disease drugs, manufacturers could find the cap prices unsustainable and discourage manufacturers from investing in rare disease. The scenario could leave patients without essential treatments, exacerbating health disparities, and undermining the primary goal of the prescription drug affordability boards. Madam Speaker, I ask you to move the amendment. Thank you.
Vice Chair of the committee.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I am very sympathetic to the individuals who suffer from rare disease. So please let me put that out front. I do want to clarify that in the definition of orphan drug, the R&D is paid for almost exclusively by federal money, because it's the only way that a company will agree to develop these kinds of drugs, because they can't make a lot of, the return on investment is not as high as they seek to get. And the problem with excluding orphan drugs from consideration is that the way that pharmaceutical companies use the orphan designation in order to maintain the level of profit that they're making. 7 of the top selling drugs have an orphan designation, 7 of them. Well, we heard that, that there's supposed to be for 1 disease or 2 diseases. Those 7 are for lots more things than the orphans, than the rare diseases that they were originally designed for. Let me tell you a little more about orphan drugs. The FDA grants pay for the development. FDA waives the $3.2 million drug application. It waives the $400,000 per drug annual program fee. There's faster approval than for non-orphan drugs. There's a tax credit up to 50% on clinical trial costs. They can deny 340B pricing. The pharmaceutical companies can deny that pricing for some hospital types. They have a minimum of 7 years of price protection from market competition, and they can extend that patent almost indefinitely. The orphan drug designation is not rescinded even after it grows to more than 200,000 people. And remember, orphan drugs are supposed to be designed for a smaller group than 200,000 people. The board has actually already considered some orphan drug status and will continue to do that. So again, I would ask you to reject this amendment and trust the board that it's going to go through a thorough and rigorous process in these decisions.
Maker of the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I appreciate the response, but I respectfully disagree. I will agree that some funding provided through the National Institute of Health covers research and development for these, but by all means, not even the majority of these orphan drugs are paid for as far as research and development through the federal government. The majority of research and development for orphan drugs is paid for by private companies, private sector. So for that reason, I press the amendment.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Oppose? Roll call. Clerk will call. Roll call.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? Clerk will take the call. There being 98 votes in the negative, the amendment fails. Are there any additional amendments?
Madam Speaker.
Yes, go ahead.
Can I ask the floor leader a question in the hopes of not having to submit another amendment for the good of the body?
More than happy to, sir.
All right, delegates, you and I had an opportunity this morning briefly to address one of the concerns, and it really, for the folks that want to follow along, so page 3, line 19 through page 4, line 27 talks about the Legislative Policy Committee and any role that they may play in the expansion of this issue to the full commercial market. And the question that I had was that in the previous bill that was passed, whether it was 2017 or 19, it's hard to follow all these things. God bless you for sticking with it, right? But
really,
the LPC had an important role. And there was an additional step, an additional review process that they took prior to PDAB setting some upper limits. And so the question that I have is, does the language in this bill create the same process as the previous legislation for a much smaller market? So now we're talking about expanding it 1.2 million people or above. Does that language, page 3 through page 4, create the same additional step that the Legislative Policy Committee has an opportunity to review this process, whether it's a plan of action, process for setting upward limits, that was established before for the legislative record?
there is no requirement that the board go back to the LPC for approval on a secondary level of authority around the commercial market. The original process was completed in the fall of '24. It was submitted to LPC. This is, and what that does is describe the exact process by which the board will consider an affordability challenge of a pharmaceutical. And that's what the LPC reviewed and gave its approval for, I believe, in October. So October or November. So they have done that recently. They have looked thoroughly at the process. The process is going to be very similar because what it does is looks at all of the available data on the pharmaceutical pricing chain for a particular drug and all of the factors that we've talked about in terms of utilization, affordability, all of that stuff is going to be the same for the commercial market. So we did not think it was necessary to put the LPC back into the process because, again, it would delay. We had a couple of months that LPC wasn't, during the intersession, wasn't meeting, and so we had to wait like 2 months to get that through anyway. So it would just be another delay process.
Okay. So just for clarification, and I appreciate that explanation, so they don't have to go back at this point. Okay. All right. So Madam Speaker, based on that answer from the floor leader, I do have an amendment at the desk. It's Amendment 503520.
Amendment number 1.
Move so much be considered reading of the amendment.
So ordered.
Basically, in not so many words, this would require, similar to the 2017, that PDAB would have to go back to the LPC prior to setting upper payment limits, and they would have 45 days, LPC that is, to go ahead and make a decision on that as to not add any delays. I asked the body to move the amendment because, and I shouldn't have said that last part about moving before giving my explanation, but look, it's a step. Expanding this to the full commercial market is a big step, and as we've heard some debate today, we're talking about accessibility. This is a very important issue, and I think adding that additional check and balance as we had before is a prudent decision. We also set some timelines, 45 days. With the advent of Zoom, the LPC committee can meet quickly, can make a decision as they did before, and we can keep the ball rolling. So with that, I ask this to move the amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the Vice Chair of the committee.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd ask the body to reject the amendment. We have already built in a delay process, so the contingency in the current bill before you says that the board has to look at the impact and effect and hopefully the savings to the state and local government on any, whether it was a UPL or other options that were put into place for cost containment. So they will have the opportunity to look at what the impact was, and they'll already have the process ready to go as soon as they have seen, they've made that evaluation. And even though it might just be 45 days, it's still a delay. And one of the things that has come out through the argument many times is the money coming back to the person at the pharmacy? And the fact is, if the drug price is lower, you don't feel the impact necessarily at the pharmacy, because if you have a commercial insurance, you are probably paying a copay or a co-insurance payment. That's not the price of the drug. So for example, someone told me this week that they pay only $8 for their Skyrizi, and they're on the state health plan. Well, the state is paying $22,000 for that same drug that you got for $8. However, moving into the commercial market, where the impact will be is on premiums. If the insurance carriers, and you know I meet with them frequently, have told me that 40 cents of every premium dollar is now going to pharmaceutical costs. If they can lower that cost in any way, it has to come back to the carrier member in the form of premium reductions, because they can only spend 20% on administrative cost, and everything else has to be medical cost. And if their medical costs go down, that gets passed through to the member. So I would ask us to reject this amendment, and let's let the process work as efficiently as it can, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Maker of the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And just my final thoughts on it, as the floor leader stated earlier, there's a tremendous amount of unknown. This hasn't worked. I mean, we have no idea how this is going to play out. We're expanding it without the unknown and simply adding the check and balance as we had in the original legislation to create this whole process, I think is the right decision. I think you can trust your colleagues in the chambers across the hall and here to move quickly if a decision needs to be made. And I think it's the right thing. And again, it's a tremendous unknown with a significant amount of consequences if it goes south. So for those reasons, I move the amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Oppose? Clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Clerk will take the call. There being 98 votes in the negative, the amendment fails. Are there any additional amendments?
Madam Speaker.
Yes. Gentleman from Cecil.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have an amendment at the desk. Amendment number 573427-1.
Amendment number 1.
Move so much be considered the reading of the amendment.
So ordered.
So we've heard a lot of talk today about price, and price is critically important. And I do truly believe that the goal of this bill is to bring down prices for our citizens, but I want to talk a little bit about availability. This amendment seeks to rule out the ability if a patient needs a drug or if the drug is in short supply. This basically creates a carve-out to say that the patient's health is more important in this situation, and the availability of these medicines is so critically important. So just describing the amendment briefly, it creates a waiver process for basically 3 scenarios, and I'll list them off and then kind of go into detail. The first scenario is if there is a shortage that is determined by the FDA or Maryland Department of Health. The second scenario is if it's determined to be an essential medication by a global body. And then the third is if it's medically necessary for continuity of care, as determined by the provider. So just to go into detail on these, if there is an actual shortage, we all know how the market works. If there's a shortage and there's a need, price tends to go up. However, we're not, as it was alluded to earlier, we're not the United States of Maryland, okay? We have to participate in a market where we have neighbors, we have adjacent jurisdictions that aren't beholden to this. So for this carve-out, if regulating the price could further impact supply, then basically that prescription drug would be available and remain outside of the PDAB imposed pricing restrictions. And this is, again, about availability. The second one is if it's deemed essential. So these type of drugs are like insulin, antibiotics, and certain cancer treatments. Imposing a price restriction on those could lead to supply issues, and again, this is an availability concern. The third one is if it's determined medically necessary for continuity of care, and this is really a conversation between the patient and the prescriber, and cost controls come at an expense of the patient's health. If the doctor weighs in and said that the patient needs it, there shouldn't be a delay. There shouldn't be no risk to the availability of that life-saving drug. So, in conclusion, we believe that this amendment keeps affordability in check, but also balances the health of the patient, and that's really what this is all about. So with that, I'd love to hear what the floor leader thinks, but I'd like to push the amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Vice Chair of the committee.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Delegate. First of all, I just need to be really clear. These are not price controls. We are not controlling anyone's prices. We are controlling our own budget. So we just need to be very clear, because the message, we want to message this correctly so that people understand what we're doing here. The FTC prohibits price setting. We cannot price set, but we can say, this is how much we're going to pay. This is how much we can afford. We've done all the data, we've done all the analysis, and we've seen that this would be a reasonable price for this drug, and this is what we can pay. So just be clear about this. It's a really important point. I'd ask the body to reject this amendment. First of all, the board is prohibited from looking at any pharmaceutical on the FDA shortage list, so they can't even look at it. They also have the flexibility, and this is in their process, that if they determine that some accessibility challenges occur after they've done some work on a bill, on a pharmaceutical, they can make a change. So there's that flexibility. I think I'm right, but I think that the United States withdrew from the World Health Organization a couple of weeks ago. So asking us to look at their drugs, I'm not sure we want to do that. And then in the medically necessary part, that is not within the purview of the board. That's in the purview of the pre-authorization process of the between the carriers, PBMs, patients, pharmacists, not pharmacists, parents, PBMs, and patients. I would refer you to last year's bill on prior authorization for that one. So with that, I would recommend, I would suggest rejecting this amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker.
Yes, go ahead.
Yep, glad to hear that some of those guardrails currently exist, especially for the FDA list. Let's codify that. There's other language in here that determines by the Maryland Department of Health. So I think that this amendment is helpful, and the fact that it ensures that availability. I don't think it hurts the bill in any way, and I'm glad to hear that there's some consensus, and all the more reason to move the amendment. With that, I ask for a favorable vote, and I push the amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Roll call.
Madam Speaker?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? Is everyone out of the... clerk will take the call. The amendment fails. Are there any additional amendments?
Madam
Go
Speaker.
ahead. Yes.
I have an amendment at desk, 583124-1.
Amendment number 1.
So colleagues, one of the things I think about with this legislation is trying to protect certainly our small pharmacies, trying to prevent where we have, pharmacy deserts in some of our lower income communities, like the communities where I grew up. And the concern is how this could negatively impact those pharmacies and those communities as an unintended consequence of this legislation. A lot of these smaller pharmacies run on very small margins. I think back to our former colleague from Anne Arundel County, whose husband owned a pharmacy, and if I remember a year ago, was robbed at gunpoint. Those type of things seriously impact those pharmacies and their ability to serve our communities. So what my amendment seeks to do is to protect them in this process by preventing a cap lower than what their cost is to acquire the drug to then provide to the community, and additionally allow them a fair cost to disperse those drugs to the community. Because if we start digging into their margins and they have to lose money on acquiring and then distributing the medications to members of our community, in many cases, that's going to put them upside down. And we're not talking about the CVS's and the Walgreens. We're talking about our local community pharmacies, the ones that have stuck in our communities through the thick and thin, the ones that we've grown up with, the folks that we know. So that's what we're seeking to do with this, just to make sure that we don't create pharmacy deserts in our community. Very simple amendment. And this goes back to, and I just want to drive the point home, one of the things that I was taught when I first got down here from the good chair of the Judiciary Committee was never allow anybody to interpret the will of the General Assembly. So if we're not being very prescriptive, no pun intended, in making sure that we're not inadvertently hurting local pharmacies, I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good amendment. It doesn't undermine the intent of the bill, and I would urge to move the amendment.
Vice Chair of the committee.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I want to thank the good gentleman because I'm on your side with the independent pharmacists. We have worked very hard on their behalf in HGO. We believe that we continue to work in ways that will help them survive in this climate. But I don't think that, so think about this for a second, because I have not figured out why the pharmacists are concerned about it. If the price of the drug is lower, then they can buy it. Right now, they can't buy the drugs because they're too expensive. And then they can't, and the reimbursement that they get from insurance companies is not enough. So if the price of the drug comes down, it seems to me that it's to their advantage. And if I'm reading that wrong or not understanding, I need to understand, I need to be educated on it. I would refer you to page 4 of the bill, which says that we cannot count a pharmacy dispensing fee towards an upper payment limit, which was our attempt to say we do not want the pharmacists to be negatively affected by this bill. We were looking out for them in this bill, and I'll take you back to the original statute in the creation of the bill, which was to protect all members of the supply chain, including pharmacies. So we're working on the pharmacies, I promise you. I've already got my summer planned. But it does not have to be in this bill, so I would ask us to reject this amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker.
Yes, go ahead.
Just to follow up, and again, so I appreciate the concern, and I'm glad that we're united in our concerns to try to protect our local pharmacies. But again, this goes back to making sure that we are not allowing others to interpret the will of the General Assembly. So what my amendment seeks to do is, to give an example, if the acquisition cost for a pharmacy is at $10 to acquire a prescription drug and then to distribute it, we will not put the cap at $8 to make sure that they're not losing money during that intermittent transaction. And there's a lot of questions on whether or not this bill would have that unintended consequence on the small pharmacies. So all we're trying to do with this amendment is to codify the fact to make sure to put a bright line that the General Assembly does not want pharmacies to take a loss when acquiring these prescription drugs to then prescribe them out to the community. So that's the intent of the amendment, and I would push the amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Clerk will take the call. The amendment fails. Are there any additional amendments to the bill to its title? No one got up. Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed to for third reading. That ends the work at the desk. Committee announcements, appropriations.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Appropriations Committee will join the Ways and Means Committee in the joint hearing room for a hearing on the governor's blueprint bill. Thank you. 1 o'clock.
Judiciary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Judiciary will be meeting at 12:30 for bill hearing.
Environment and Transportation.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The House Environment and Transportation Committee will meet for bill hearings at 1 p.m.
Ways and Means.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Ways and Means Committee will join Appropriations and 2 Senate committees for a joint hearing on the governor's blueprint bill at 1 p.m.
Economic Matters.
Wow. Economic Matters. Thank you, Madam Speaker. House Economic Matters Committee will just be meeting with ourselves at 1 p.m.
Health and Government Operations.
And we're also meeting with ourselves at 1 p.m. Thank you.
Are there any subcommittee announcements? Yes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Housing and Real Property Subcommittee will be meeting by ourselves via Zoom today at 5 p.m. 5 p.m.
All right.
Madam Speaker.
Judiciary.
I apologize, Madam Speaker. The House Judiciary Committee in a correction will be meeting for bill hearings at 1 o'clock. There is a meeting of subcommittee chairs at 12.
Okay. Any other subcommittee? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Environment Subcommittee will be meeting virtually at 6 p.m.
Yes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Government Operations and Health Facilities Subcommittee will be meeting at noon on Zoom.
Noon on Zoom. Okay. Any other subcommittee announcements? Seeing none. Any delegation announcements? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Prince George's County Bi-County Committee will be meeting via Zoom tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. 8:30 a.m. and there'll be no meeting of the Education Committee.
Okay. All right. No other delegations? Okay. Any caucus announcements? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Legislative Black Caucus of Maryland will meet tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m. in the Baltimore City Delegation Room. Please arrive a few minutes early for refreshments. 8:30 a.m. sharp. Thank you.
Okay. Any other caucus announcements? Okay. Black History Moment. Gentleman from Prince George's County.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and good morning, colleagues. It is still morning.
This is your Black History Moment roll call once again this year. So we are now going through every county just to recognize those significant individuals from your particular county. Starting with Allegheny County. In 1971, Edward L. McKay became the first Black person elected to the Cumberland City Council. Anne Arundel County, in 2006, Richard E. S. Lewis became the first Black person appointed to the Anne Arundel County Board of Education. From Baltimore City, Perrin Mitchell was the first African American elected to Congress in 1970. Baltimore County, Dr. Kizzmekia thank you, I'm glad somebody caught on. Baltimore City always leading the way. Appreciate you. Baltimore County, Dr. Kizzmekia Corbett, a biologist and immunologist, played a pivotal role in developing the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine. Calvert County, Willa B. Cooper, a significant educator who worked for the integration of the public school system in Calvert County. From Caroline County, Benny L. Wimberly, an important community activist and educator who advocated for equality and education reform. From Carroll County, Dr. William H. Hayward, an educator and civil rights advocate who worked to improve the educational opportunities for African Americans in the county. From Charles County, James Thomas McCoy, the first Black teacher in Charles County who dedicated his life to education and served as a role model. Dorchester County, let me come back. Frederick.
Get your sheets in order.
From Garrett County, Dr. George Shea, a community leader and medical doctor who was influential in healthcare and education for African Americans in Garrett County. Harford County, Reverend Dr. Benjamin Franklin Lee, a prominent minister and civil rights activist who worked to provide educational opportunities and fight against segregation. From Howard County, Warren M. Mitchell, a notable educator and civic leader who advocated for African American education and equal rights. From Kent County, Keturah Brown became the first African American to serve on the Kent County Board of Education. In Montgomery County, Juanita Jackson Mitchell was a lawyer and civil rights advocate. She was the first Black woman in Maryland to pass the bar exam and played a significant role in desegregation efforts in the state. From Queen Anne's County, Dr. Bernadette L. Stokes made history as the first African American woman to serve as the superintendent of Queen Anne's County Public Schools. St. Mary's County, Frederick Johnson became the first African American to serve as a member of the St. Mary's County Board of Commissioners in 1982. Somerset County, William Myers made history by becoming the first African American elected to the Somerset County Board of Education. From Talbot County, Dr. Tyrone Taborn made history as the first African American to be appointed to the Talbot County Planning and Zoning Commission. Washington County, William Miles made history by becoming the first African American elected to the Washington County Board of Commissioners. From Wacomico, Rudolph Rudy Crane was the first Black man to represent Maryland's Eastern Shore in the Maryland House of Delegates, serving from 1999 to 2014. From Worcester County, Dr. Lily Johnson made history as the first African American to serve on the Worcester County Board of Education. So glad I said that right. From Dorchester, we always want to recognize, just because she is my favorite heroine, I know we go back to her every year, but Harriet Tubman, who was the iconic abolitionist and political activist who escaped slavery and led hundreds of enslaved people to freedom, and I know. Okay, so I got y'all Frederick, because they had it written down. We do recognize Frederick County, but I got to think of the person, because I wrote it down wrong. I apologize.
Madam Speaker.
Can I yield to Delegate Fair, please, Madam Speaker?
Delegate Fair, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would the good delegate from Prince George's County agree that prominent civil rights leader in the state of Maryland from Frederick, Lord Nickens, would be a wonderful person to honor on the floor today?
I do agree, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And to conclude, from Prince George's County, the first woman, Black person elected for U.S. Federal Senate, Angela Brooks, from Prince George's County, the first Black senator to represent the state of Maryland. This has been your Black History Moment. It is American history. It is Maryland history. It is our history. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Any personal or guest announcements? From the, let me do the back on up. Okay, go ahead, back.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Coming to you today, I just wanted to acknowledge that the blueprint continues to work just great here in the state of Maryland. I would like to acknowledge Lindale Middle School for being the STEM robotics champion here in the state of Maryland this year. We continue to recognize them and acknowledge them in District 32. And to the 32 team, congratulations for all the hard work y'all are doing to support our school systems. We continue to champion Mr. Walker, who is the principal administrator there at the school, along with the STEM administrators. Thank all of y'all, and let's go Blueprint.
Okay. All right. Thanks for it. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, our 12 distinguished universities that comprise the USM, including Bowie State, Frostburg, Salisbury, Towson, University of Maryland College Park, University of Baltimore County, University of Maryland at Baltimore, University of Maryland Eastern Shore, University of Maryland Center of Environmental Science, and our 3 regional higher education centers in Montgomery County, Southern Western Maryland, are all here in the galleries, or were here in the galleries. They include the University System of Maryland Student Council, the USM Council of University System Staff, the USM Council of University Systems Faculty. This is the 8th time that these councils have come together to advocate for public higher education here in Annapolis. As advisory councils to the Board of Regents and the Chancellor, these members represent the academic professionals, technical, skilled, and managerial groups of employees, as well as students, all of whom are so vital to our university system. The councils are part of the USM's shared governance group, committed to representing concerns by actively participating at all levels within and beyond the USM. The councils strive to foster respect, communication, and collaboration within the university community. I'm pleased to welcome them to here in Annapolis, and I ask you to welcome them as well. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Okay. All right, newest member from Anne Arundel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, we're all very well aware of the great work that the Chesapeake Bay Foundation does, but what you may not know is that they have an amazing student leadership program in which they help develop the next generation of environmental leaders in allowing high school students to come in and get involved. So today, potentially in the gallery, but on campus, we are joined by 18 of those high school students, and please join me in giving them a warm house welcome. Thank you.
Young lady from Prince George's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is the last announcement about the blood drive. I wanted to let you all know I'm a little bit disappointed because I was turned down today. So not everybody can give blood. I was turned down because, as everybody knows, it was in the Washington Post, in 2020 I had breast cancer, and you have to be clear for 5 years before you can give blood. So I'm not quite at the 5-year mark. I'm disappointed, but I want to ask you again, because it is absolutely not too late. You can go to the Blood Mobile. It's a green bus. You can see it as you walk back from here to the House Office building, just outside the door. And it doesn't take very long. It probably takes longer to fill out the paperwork than it does to actually give blood. But please do what you can. Thanks.
Okay. We were still on personal announcement, just wanted to guest announcements what we were on. Okay, but that's okay. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, colleagues. Madam Speaker, I apologize. Permission to use the delegate's name.
Permission granted.
Thank you. On behalf of Delegate Sheila Ruth and I just want you to join me in welcoming a fine student government body who may be still here, but definitely 30 are over in our office. I'm waiting, so hopefully they're listening, from the Watershed Charter School. They're here visiting us. It's about 30 students to learn the government legislative process and to remind us that charter schools are public schools. Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Speaker, I totally apologize.
Wait a minute. Everybody getting up. Who got up first? You. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want the body to welcome representatives from MILE, which is the Maryland Initiative for Literacy and Equity. It's actually a collaboration and partnership between the University of Maryland and Morgan State University. So I believe Dr. Simone Gibson and Donald Bolger are here with their students, and give them a hearty welcome. Thank you.
Can they stand up? Okay. Gentleman from Baltimore County.
And my colleague has already talked about Charter School Day here in Annapolis. So one of my very good friends, who is the head of the Baltimore Collegiate School for Boys, Edwin Avent, I believe is here as well. If he could stand up this way. All right, very good. Edwin Avent with the Baltimore Collegiate School for Boys.
Any other personal or guest announcements? Who's up first? I'll just go like this. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just wanted to correct the record in the fight for inclusion that Cecil County was left out, but we also want to recognize Judge William Davis, Jr., who was the first African-American judge from Cecil County. Thank you to the delegate from Cecil County.
Anyone else? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have a vote change on House Bill 424, Amendment 293321, to nay.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to call you join us. Welcome Leadership Howard County. They are visiting Annapolis today.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, men, women, children, those with skin and those with skin, tomorrow, Thursday, February 20th from 10:30 to 1:30 in the Goldstein Treasury Building. Free, I say free. Skin cancer screenings will be performed by the dermatologist from the Maryland Dermatology Society. Free skin cancer screening, private patient booths, gowns available for full and partial body screenings, boxed lunches. So do come, bring your skin. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in the gallery I have three guests. The first is my new legislative aide who was an intern and got a promotion, Daniel Mosley. He's a student at Howard Community College. Next to him is Adam Rosenberg from LifeBridge Health's Center for Hope. They most notably oversee a number of the Safe Street sites, 4 of which have had 0 murders over 1 year recently. And lastly is Mr. Brian Upshur, an attorney for the federal government, but a part of the Baltimore City Police Accountability Board. If y'all could welcome him for me, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today I want to welcome a group that continues a legacy of education, empowerment, and advocacy. Today we are joined in the House Gallery by members of the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, NARAB, on the occasion of their 5th anniversary as the Greater Metropolitan Associates Realist from Montgomery County, Maryland, which they are the 111th local board of NARAB. NARAB was founded in 1947 by African American real estate professionals who were denied membership in the National Association of Realtors. NARAB is the oldest Black professional and trade association in America. NARAB exists to promote democracy in housing, remediate discriminatory housing practices, advocate for public policy to expand home ownership, and to expand the economic improvement of its members and the communities that they serve. Their key initiatives are to support legislation to increase home ownership, administer HUD-approved housing counseling programs, increase the number of Black appraisers through their education and training, and support initiatives to build generational wealth through home ownership. Owning a home is the keystone of wealth, both financial affluence and emotional security. So let's welcome them for the work they do.
Anybody else get up? Quorum call.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their presence? The clerk will take the call. There being 133 members present, and the House is still in session. Recognizing the majority leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that the House stands adjourned until Thursday, February 20th at 10 a.m.